Hi everyone. So welcome to today meetup from UiPath Community Italian chapter of Turin. This is the first meetup that we held in English, since we thought that given the subject being generally speaking in English, even when it's done in local countries, it was better to do it all in English in order to get together people from different countries, since this can be a topic quite useful for everyone. So before we start, just a quick introduction. If you want, you can go on using the QR code you see in the screen, or at slido.com and using the hashtag RPA. So you can select which country are you joining from, so we can see how many of us are from different parts of the world. Just one more minute, since we wait for the last comers, and then we can start. Okay, so we can start with today's session. So hello everyone, I am Stefano. I am RPA technical leader at BSP Consultant. I'm also the Italian chapter leader for the community, for the Turin chapter of the UiPath community, and also UiPath MVP for the 2023, and also I was in 2022. Here with me presenting today, it's Enrico Bruno, which is RPA project manager at BSP Consultant. So you can see also our contacts. Feel free to write us an email or add us to LinkedIn if you have any questions later during after the presentation. And also you can see here the link of the community chapter. You can subscribe and join in order to get the future events we will hold. So I will see that today I would like to hold the most interactive meeting as possible. So if you want, you feel free to join us. Also activate your audio if you have any questions during the meetup, and also you can write in the chat. We will check the questions as they come and try to answer. Also, if you don't have question but you have something to say related to the topic, or some suggestions, or something you do differently, feel free to tell us, so we can make a discussion as more productive as possible. So this is the agenda for today. Now we are doing a quick introduction, and after we will focus on the documentation related to robotic process automation, in particular with UiPath projects. We will talk about what are the things to do before the documentation and before the start of a project, and then focus on what are the main documents used in an RPA project, in particular the process definition document and the solution design document. Also, we will see other type of documents. We can be sometimes are used, sometimes are not. This depends on the type of project and what it's decided at start. And finally, some tip and tricks and some examples. We will leave a few minutes at the end for some Q&A session, but again, if you have some questions anytime during the presentation, feel free to stop us or write in the chat. So as I said before, if you want, you can join at slido.com. We will have a couple of questions now, so we can jumpstart the discussion. I will show. Okay, so we can see that there are already different countries joining in. That's great. Now you can go on. You can again you can check the QR code directly, or you can go on the website and put hashtag RPA, and you will see the question that pop up. You can select the answer you prefer. We'll leave a couple minutes in order to everyone that want to answer. Okay, just a few more seconds to answer this question, but we can see that there is already a winning answer. So the majority of who answered this question is brought the documentation itself. So it will be interesting to know also what are your point of view on writing documentation, and if you have any maybe other than question any suggestion of what do you do in your projects to have a better documentation and to have a better organization of all your projects. So we go on the next question. This is, I think it's really interesting because these are the main documentation that for best practice is suggested, especially by UiPath. But as we have seen in our projects, they are not always used all. So it's interesting to see what are the documents that are mostly used and what are not. So feel free to answer. You can select, of course, multiple answers. So if you use more than one document in your project, you can select more than one. And also, if you have selected other, if you want, you can write in the chat which is the type of document that you use in your projects. Okay, just a few more seconds. If there is someone else that want to answer this. Okay, so I think this is it. As we can see, the process definition document, which we will see in the presentation, is the main document used during RPA projects, is used by almost anyone that answered the question, while the solution design document used at the time, and also after that all the other documents. It's interesting that the test assessment document is not used. We can discuss later why is not used. That maybe why in best practice is should be used. I agree with the answer, because also in our project we have seen that the test assessment documents is almost never used, because the tests are performed during the directly with the user, without the help or the need of a written document. But it should be better to follow the best practice and use a document relative to also to test other than for the process definition document. So let's go on with the presentation. So I leave the presentation to Enrico, which will start, which is starting the to illustrate what are the best practices to follow before the documentation.
Thank you, Stefano. And let me say I'm very happy to be here sharing this interesting topic with you. Stefano, can you resume the presentation in the meanwhile? Okay. Okay, so let's jump in the automation journey, talking about documentation. And let me introduce some words before the main part of the documentation. There are a few points to introduce, to talk about in order to start in the good way the documentation and all the steps that are needed to start the development. So The first point that you see is the agreement of the best practices, because all all the features that will be seen later that has to be chosen very well, and the best practices are very useful. So we have to choose who is in charge of every step, how to proceed, and what kind of documentation provide. As we saw in the question showed by Stefano, there are many kind of documentation, not always are all needed. So in the first part, all the actors in the automation process has to be aware of which kind of documentation will be provided, and who will provide the various documents. So there will be the developers, the project managers, the business people involved, like the process owner, that is the key user on the business side, but also the solution architect of the development. And maybe in some smaller processes, not all these people are involved, and so something can be changed in the best practice. So all these points are very important before the start of the development, as well of the coding standards. So the naming convention, the users of assets, and so on. How to manage the workflow in the development are all the rules to be chosen at the beginning, and maybe also written in the documentation. So all these rules can be passed between the developers, and then maybe also be useful at the end of the automation, when maybe there will be an application maintenance service for the robots. So if the documentation is well written and with all the information filled in, will be very useful also for the monitoring of the process, and maybe for some announcement that can come up during the go live and later. Also, the versioning is very important, because both for development, so for the code, and also for the documentation, we have to keep the version updated to distinguish the later version from the oldest one, in order to have also an history of what it is done in the automation. And also the last point is the more let me say critical between the automation workers, because the effort is the key of our work. So we have to estimate correctly not only the development phase, but also the analysis phase. So in the document that we will provide, we have to identify the days of effort and the cost, maybe also for every step of the automation. So the analysis, in which we will provide some kind of documentation that we will see in the next slides. The development with also in this point the right documentation, the testing, and the go live, and then maybe the monitoring with the MS also in some cases also an assisted go live. So maybe the developer will assist the first run in production of the process, and every of this step can have or must have in some cases the correct documentation. Also with UiPath, we have some very useful tools like the UiPath Automation Hub that can assist you in every step of this journey. You can go to the next slide, Stefano, thanks. Okay, the first document that we see here is the process definition document. That is the, let me say, functional analysis of the robot. So we will describe the process in first in a business way. So here is called the as-is process. So it's the business step by step flow of the activity. So every click, every step, every keyboard that press the user, every application that is involved has to be mapped in the as-is view. So this is the exact replica of the activity of the user in his everyday task. So we will have all the business aspects of the process. We will provide a workflow with the exact activity of the user, and also we have to choose and to select the input and the output of the process in the way that the user does it. So it's like a screenshot of the activity of the robot. Sorry, not the robot, but the user. And in this case, the activity is provided by the business analyst. So there will be like an interview of the business analyst directly with the process owner and the users, the business users, and they will see all the steps of the business activity. Then the critical part of the PDD is the transformation of the as-is process to the to-be process. So first of all, we have to provide a high-level solution. So we have to transform the human activity to the robot activity. So maybe some steps are not exactly the same, because as you know for sure, the robot activity can be more efficient working in a different way from the human, and in other cases the robot activity will be exactly the same. So this is an aspect that the business analyst with the solution architect has to design correctly in order to have the most efficient design of the robot to provide for the developers. So also in this case, we will have input and output may be different from what they are for the business, but containing the same information as the activity has to be provided finally to the business users. So maybe the the template, for instance, of the output can be different, but the main information is the same. And other important topics and information to provide also for business, but also for the technical people, the reporting and the logs of the robot, in order to have all the people involved be aware of what the robot has done, and maybe the errors or the exception that have come out, how to recognize them and intervene in the right way. Then at the end of the design of the process, there are two very important steps that are the sign off. So the business and with the process owner or the people responsible of this process have to sign off the document in order to officially start the development. In this case, they recognize the as-is activity, so they confirm that the as-is activities is in the same way they do the activity, and also they accept the to be. So they accept that the robot will do in a way that is compliant with their needs. And also another point that is very important in the documentation, and I know that sometimes is missing and can create a lot of issues, is the extra requirements agreement. So there has to be some of some quotation, some accord to decide on how the changes has to be managed in during the development and also after, because it happens many times that during the development phase, some of the actors, maybe the developer and also the business, recognized that some steps are not working correctly in a functional point of view, from a functional point of view. So maybe they have missed something in the as-is, or transforming the as-is in the to be, something was modified in the wrong way. So the extra requirements agreement is very important, because they we can, in this way we can decide how to manage every change in the process. All issues that can cause delays, or maybe an increase on the effort. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So this is a little resume or of the information that are contained in the DPD. Then later we can show also some examples, so will be more clear for some of you that never saw a PDD before. So the as-is and to be has to be depicted with the diagram, so in which the process logic is reflected in a clear way. And also we have to map the exception. Like I said, every aspect of the process, not only the happy path, let me say, but also the exception and maybe the errors has to be managed, meaning that we have to give the developer the information on how manage and how treat all the exception that in the process come out. Then if the process it's a big one with some sub-process, we have to provide also a diagram for every sub-process. And also always for very big processes can be useful to have high level diagram. So maybe we have a process with different sprints and maybe with a human activity between the different sprints, also a high level diagram can be very useful. Then the guidelines have to be step by step. So every input and output and every modification inside the process has to be mapped correctly. And also every step in the UI has to be documented. So when we are working with the application, we have to map every click, every write on some fields and so on. And also all the rules has to be applied. So also the logic, the main logic has to be depicted and mapped in the flow. This also for the to be, obviously. Then an important phase is the exception handling. So we have to choose the behavior of the robot both for expected and unexpected exception. The expected exception are like the business exception. So maybe the robot goes in error for a particular reason, but it's a business reason. Maybe, I don't know, if you are talking about invoices, we have an invoice that has 0 as import that is not correct. Also, like I already said, input and output has been documented, and maybe in case of unstructured data, we have to provide the correct managing of this kind of data. And also, like I said, also the screenshot has to be created and done for every step of the process involving the application. Okay, we can go on with the next slide. The last part is involving some aspects that don't have to be missed during the writing of the process definition document. So we have to remember every time to mention all the logic in the process. So we have to write in the document also the parts that are not included in the automation. So we have to specify that some part of the flow, some part of the as-is flow cannot be automated, or it's chosen to be not to be automated, because maybe there is a few steps that are very costly to automate. So the development will be the effort of this part of development will be very high. So according with the process owner, we can choose to avoid this part of automation. So we have to include also this in the documentation in order to specify and have to be clear that is out of scope, let me say, this part of the activity. And then we have to specify if we have undocumented application, such as public or government websites. So maybe in the automation, we will encounter some websites or any kind of application that we don't have full access to the code or the application. Like I said, for instance, a government application or website maybe is not fully accessible from the company and the developers that are working on the automation. Okay, so for the PDD, sorry, that's all. I leave the ball to Stefano to go on with the technical documentation.
Okay, thank you, Enrico. So now we can focus on the other type of documents that are for best practice used in an RPA project. After the process definition document, there is the solution design document. This kind of document is usually created before the development at the design phase of an automation project. So after that, the process has been selected, the PDD has been created and signed off, the solution design document will be created. As I said before, is not used always in all projects, as you know, like since you answered like this in the poll at the beginning. It could be a standalone document, or sometimes it's also integrated directly within the PDD. So it's part. Sometimes it's part of a PDD, and it focuses on the more technical aspects of the documentation. So in the PDD, there is the let's say the to-be diagram, so a flowchart with all the steps that the automation has to perform, and in the SDD there are the technical aspects of that steps. So, for example, we can put what are the tools that we will use to perform the automation. So, for example, if we are creating a flowchart using queues or using data tables or using an Excel in input, if we are using the robotic enterprise framework, or if we chose to create different automations, so for example a dispatcher and a performer and so on. It's also really important to focus inside this kind of document, to focus on the reusability of the components. So when we create a solution design document, we can check the previously created solution design document for the automation already developed in the past, and check if there are any components that can be reused. This is usually the case if, for example, we have different automation made for the same departments or for the same process owner. So it's possible that some websites or some desktop application are used in different automation. So by creating this solution design document and putting all the things that we develop inside and how they are developed, we can check directly and get to know which are the components that we can reuse. So we can save a lot of effort even before starting the development. And finally, of course, together with the queues and the constants, variables, and so on, we will also check the assets. This is a very important aspect to put in the documentation, because we, as an RPA project, we have to know what is the governance of the selected asset that we use in a process. So, for example, if I use a particular credential in order to log in a public site, I have to know which is the governance of that credential. So if the credential is used just by the robot, if the credential is shared from to the robot and, for example, the process owner, and also who is in charge of updating the credential in case of password expiration. All these aspects usually are discussed not only within the RPA team, but also with the project manager, of course, and the process owner. It's not mandatory that the process owner signed the solution design document, but it's important to check with the process owner for these aspects. In particular, the last one about the governance of the data. After the SDD, there is another document which is maybe even less used than the solution design document, which is the development specification document. Also, in this case, for best practice, is presented as a standalone document, but it's not mandatory. It can be put integrated inside the solution, then the SDD, or even at the end of the PDD. This document is creating during the development. So when we start the development, we start the creation of this document, and is updated while we perform all the aspects of the development until the live phase. So it contains any aspect related to the development. So, for example, which type of automation we decided to use, if there is any user interface automation, if there is computer vision involved inside, if there are any configuration files, for example, and where they are stored. As I said before, which are the constant and credential used, which is the name of that credential and assets. This is really important because it's related to the process, and it's not put usually inside the PDD. So it's not if there is no documentation related to the development phase, these are all or aspects that can be lost after the development. Also, this usually is updated if, as Enrico said before, it's possible that we have some changes and some fixes to do during the development regarding the PDD, and also after the development during the live phase. So, for example, maybe we have done the development, it's all correct, and we are ready to go live with the process, and maybe in the live phase, switching from a certification environment to a production environment, there are some minor things to change. So it's important to keep track of all the changes we do in that phase, because if after a while we have to take back the project to the certification environment, maybe for an enhancement, for a fix, and so on, we will have to remember that are some things that are different from the certification environment to the production environment. Sometimes also this is not mandatory, but it can be useful. The DSD can contain relevant monitoring data. So, for example, which is the average runtime of an item, and also if there are some errors that are encountered a lot related to other errors that are not encountered so often. This can be useful because during maintenance phase are all aspects that are not relevant to the development itself, but can be useful to keep track of a correct run of a process. So for example, if I have a process and I know that every item take an average of 1 minute, if during the maintenance I see that one item is stuck for 20 minutes, I know that there is something wrong. This document usually is signed off by the solution architect in order to keep track of all the development aspects did by all the development team. There is also, as we said, as we saw in the initial poll, another document which is the test scenario document, which I think that is really important, but is not. I agree with you. Is not always used in the projects. Maybe because sometimes it is thought that it's not useful to keep track of the scenarios after the tests are performed. I partially agree, but it's also important to compile the test scenario during the test phase, because in that way we can check all the possible scenarios, the correct one and the incorrect one, which are maybe more important to test than the correct one. All the tests have to be created by taking into account the PDD flow. So we will have to check the as is and also the to be that are present in the PDD, and check all the end branches that are possible in the logic. So for any logic branch that is created in the flow, I should check with one or more tests if the process behaves correctly. Of course, the test scenario is signed off by the process owner, which it usually checks all the tests, see if the logic is coherent with what it does manually on its laptop, and finally accepts the value of the test, and so the process can end the development phase and test phase and go on production. Finally, this document is not related to the design or development phase, but I think it's really important because it can help the automation journey by selecting the correct processes. I for this topic I will leave the table to Enrico, which is kind of an expert on the assessment matrix. So if he wants to add something regarding this kind of document.
Thank you, Stefano. So, as my colleague said, we use the assessment matrix during the process discovery. So, this can be a very useful tool when we have many processes to choose, and maybe not all of them can pass the automation check. So we have first of all to choose the priority of the process to be developed. So starting with the first, meaning that we have to develop starting with the process and the automation that can provide a big saving in terms of cost or time. So we choose the winning processes, and we start developing them, and so on with the others that are in the matrix with some variables that say that are good to develop, but maybe the advantage can come out after some times. I make an example. We start with the processes that maybe run every day and save a lot of time every day to the user, and then we pass to the others that maybe for financial or some other reports runs every month or even once a year. So this one that runs less time during the year, we leave them at the end of the automation if the matrix says to us that it's efficient to develop, and so spend development time to automate this kind of process. So we have some rule to choose in order to create our matrix. For instance, UiPath provides us a very detailed matrix with all these variables already included. So can be the error predictability, as mentioned here, the time effort, but also the numbers of steps that are included in the process, the number of rules that are also in the process, the timing, so how many minutes or hours the user takes to perform these activities. And also, very important point is to adapt the metrics to the size of the company and to the maybe the composition of the COE. Because depending of the skills that the COE, the RPA COE has in one company, we can choose different variables for the metrics. And also it's very important to have clear the kind of automation that we have, and also the application that we are going to work on. And as I mentioned already in the PDD, the kind of input and outputs, because especially for the inputs, if we have scanned documents or other kind of unstructured data, this is a variable that has to be included in the assessment metrics. Thank you. We can go on with the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Now, in the last final minutes, we can see a few, let's say, tips and tricks for having a better documentation and following best practices. Some of that, of course, we already saw that during the presentation, but it's important to highlight them. So we started with maintain a centralized repository. As we said in the beginning, it's important to keep all the documentation and also all the development in track, and also to have the possibility to do backtrack in case of errors, in case of loss of data, for example. So for documentation, for example, a SharePoint or shared drive, and for the development there is Git, the versioning capabilities already included within UiPath. So for example, Git and SVN. It's important also, as we already said, to define a naming convention from the start. So decide the naming of the process, the assets, the queues, and so on. Everything that is used inside an automation in order to keep track of the different processes and what assets are linked to the processes and so on. As Enrico already said, use a fixed matrix for the estimation of the effort. So decide from the beginning which are the data and the steps that we select. So the number of the sub-processes, the number of the application used inside the process, number of the steps, and the complexity. In that way, we can go on during the automation and confront every automation that we create and give an estimation of all the phases of development, test, and go live, which is more and more correct as we go on during the automation project. As we said in the presentation, it's important to focus on the reusability of the tools, not only for the development, so the reusability of the components, but also for analysis. So it's important to if possible, to create similar logic even in different processes, but that sometimes are similar because they are maybe done by the same process owner or they are in the same department. And also standardize the reporting and the logging. So create activity reports that are always similar, if not the same, that are stored in the same way. So if we decide from the start that the report is sent by email, try to keep the behavior, this behavior the same in all the automations. As Enrico highlighted before, the PDD is useful for what has to be automated, but also for what has not to be automated. So if there are some steps that are done manually, it's important to highlight them in the documentation, because if this is not done during the development, there will be some missing parts and the developer will won't have an idea of what to do. The last two points are, let's say, a little less serious, but they are important as well. So it's important to focus on the reporting for all the aspects of the development, the project, the automation project, and also the development. So report every documentation we create, use the versioning in every documentation, and also report all the development. So use a lot of activity reports, put in the activity reports any aspect that can be useful for the process owner to check if the automation is done correctly, and also to the maintenance team in order to check if there are some errors during the automation. And finally, I think if you created the documentation before with UiPath, you should know that the task capture is really important and a powerful tool in order to create automation directly. So you can just use the task capture to spy all the steps that are done by the process owner or the business user, and use the template that you prefer to create directly the PDD. So you can just pass from the as is to the to be, to the creation of the to be directly by using the task capture. Okay, so right now we can see, we can take a quick look on some examples of documents. I think that they can be interesting to check. These are all the documents that are let's say used and suggested by UiPath. So as you can see, as you maybe already know, the process definition document, since you already use that, but it's quite easy to to understand, since it has an introduction part on what are the key aspects and steps of the automation, the as-is process description with a quick overview on what the process does, what is the execution time, some data that can be told directly by the process owner. So, for example, how many times it runs, if there are some peaks during the time, the input data and the output data, which are really important. The application used, of course, a list with all the application. The as-is process map, which is the one that is extracted directly by the task capture, the process statistic, which is the number of count that is done automatically in the task capture. So the number of clicks, for example, the time between different clicks, and so on. The description of the input data and the output data, and finally the to-be process description. So this usually is a high-level workflow done in a diagram flow chart, and after that is divided in details. So every step that have to be done by the to be have to be divided itself. And finally, as I said, it's really important to show what is in scope for RPA, so everything that is in to be, and also what is out of scope. So what the RPA has not to perform, so it's performed manually, for example, or it's not done at all. And finally, the list of business exception, so the known exception that can be done, and also some unknown exceptions. So, for example, in case there is some kind of error, what has the application perform? Usually is maybe send an email or write a report. And also, finally, a list of the reporting. So what are the reports to create? What are how they have to be saved, and so on. And finally, some additional resources. So, for example, a video recording, if can be provided, is really important. Okay, since we don't have a lot of time left, I will just show you finally what I think is also another important document, which is the process assessment document, as Enrico explained before. And as he said, it's really subjective, the creation, how the process assessment matrix is created, and what are the steps that are checked. So usually the most used one are, for example, the number of the steps that are used, the number of applications that are used, what is the data, so if the input data is structured or unstructured, if the input is scanned, and so on. So and we can give a score on all these aspects, and after that create let's say a formula comparing all these aspects, and create a, um, let's say feasibility score. So these, for example, are some questions that can be related to the process. We can check what are the correct answers, and it will give a score. And finally, it will explain which is the automation potential. This is here is called automation potential, but you can call it as you want, and give a final score and final hours of effort. So the creation of this, you can create this matrix as you want, given of all the aspects that you need to check in your company. And it's important to have a standardized matrix from the start in order to create a perfect estimation tool during all the phases of the project. So we are already a few minutes late. So I don't know if you have any questions. Feel free to join, unmute yourself and ask questions, or write in the chat. Also, if you want to suggest any other future topics that you want to discuss in the future meetups in English or in Italian, if you prefer, since we are the Italian community, and if you feel free to join in the chat, or also as we said at the start, you can join the local chapter of Turin by going in the link. And also I leave you again our emails and the LinkedIn profiles. Feel free to write us if you have any questions later on. We are glad to answer it later. We will also provide the recording of the presentation, and also the slide deck in the community meetup link, so you can check it later.
Please, anyone, feel free to tell us in the chat whether you have like any subjects you would like to see in the next meetups, in the community meetups. We are very interested in what you actually need in terms of theme subjects, what you're looking forward to see in an event, what you're willing to learn together. So, or to explore any subjects, just drop us in the chat, like what you would like to see in the next events, so we know. Thank you very much, Stefano. Thank you very much, Enrico, for today.
Thank you. Thank you, anyone, for joining.